Welcome to the Special Needs Kids Are People Too podcast with Amy Bodkin, EDS. Amy is an autistic adult who also happens to be a school psychologist turned special needs consultant and public speaker. She's also a homeschooling mom to 2 autistic kiddos, a yoga instructor, a card-carrying Trekkie, and an all-around fun person. And last but not least, Amy is an advocate for seeing every child as a person, not a diagnosis. Because a special needs kid is just like any other child, just more so. Here's Amy Bodkin.
Hi, I'm Amy Bodkin, and welcome to another special episode of Special Needs Kids Are People Too. Today, I have several special guests. I have Faye Smith, who you may recognize her voice, maybe. She's been a voice actor and worked with the Super Mario Brothers franchise, as well as Genshin Impact, and she's done some other video games too. Laura, which other ones did you do?
Fire Emblem Fates. I played a little boy named Kana in that. I've done a bunch of work for a company called Madhead Games, which do those hidden object type games. I've done many jobs for them. Lots of just scattered stuff, and then some TV and film work too, and commercials, various things. Lots of commercial voiceover work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I looked at your the list of all of them, and there were quite a few, and they were all rather varied. So, yeah. So I invited Faye Smith, as well as some of the students from my membership group, to be part of this podcast because we have been talking in this series about storytelling. And storytelling, a lot of times when we think about storytelling, we think about a book or an oral storyteller or some kind of myths or ancient mythology or something like that. But storytelling is something that we actively participate in lots of different mediums. It can be video games, it can be TV, it can be movies, it can be just talking and telling a story. And there's so many different ways of being able to share ideas, thoughts, and even just larger ideas too, that sometimes come in and seep their way into a different movie or story or book or video game. And sometimes there's bigger ideas than maybe we recognize when we first look at it too. That's kind of the nice thing about storytelling, is it has layers. So Faye, you've been doing this for a while now.
Yes.
Because you've got a list of very different places. So I'm assuming, something drew you into this kind of work. I mean,
into acting work?
Acting, voice acting.
Yeah.
Specifically.
Well, I got in, it was interesting when I was in kind of growing up, my sister, I have an older sister who was just I'm so lucky to have this built-in playmate who was so fun and creative. And she was a massive reader, and she read everything. I cannot tell you how many times when I would be shopping with her and my mom, and if we were in a store and she found a book anywhere, any kind of a book in section, a comic book section, whatever, she would take whatever reading material she was interested in, and she would go find a quiet place under a rack of clothes or something and sit down and read. And my mom would be in a white hot panic thinking that she'd been kidnapped. She would just be, Lisa, and running through the store and calling her name. And Lisa she could tune everything out when she was reading. My mom would be like, we were calling and calling you. And she would be like, oh, I didn't hear you. And she didn't. She was in her own world. And I was such the typical pesty little sister, because she was such a great playmate and she was so creative and had such a great imagination that I used to when she would be reading, I would come and bug her. I'd come sit by her and just be can we play? Can we play? And she'd be like, I'm reading, and get really irritated with me because I just craved her company because she was so interesting. And a lot of things that we played were storylines she pulled out of books she read. And what was really, I'll never forget, because when we were little, I wasn't even in school yet. I was maybe preschool, and she was in what I call big kid school. So she was in first grade. We shared a bedroom, and I remember before we'd fall asleep every night, I'd be like, Lisa, tell me about school today. What happened? Because I was so excited to go, because I wanted to be just like her. So everything she was doing ahead of me as the older sister, I was like, tell me what that was like. What's it like at big kids school? Tell me what it's like. And she would tell me stories of things she had read that day. she would tell me like the story. And years later, I'd be like reading a book and I'd be like, how come I know how this ends? And it was because she had told me the story when we were little. Like I'd be like later on in grade school, suddenly reading something, and she read way above her reading level at a very young age. So she was just this kind of magical sibling to have in that way, where she was so smart and she was so curious. She read everything from Lord of the Rings, science fiction, books about dragons, and like stuff that I wasn't even that interested in. But sometimes to get her to play with me, we'd have to play those plots. She'd be like, all right, I'll play Barbies, but it has to be the Dragonwood series. Like we have to do it according to that. So I'd be like, all right. So I got this like really interesting wide exposure. She read a huge variety of nonfiction. She read like popular, like but she could read things really fast. Like she would just be done in a day. So I got this very great introduction and craving for reading and storytelling, and then play coming out of that, right? Yeah. And then put this on top of it. So when I was probably around like third grade, my mom had gone back to work. And so in the summer, she only had to work, like she worked half day while we were in school. But then she was home before we were, because she would work and then we would get out of school around like 3, but she was home. But during the summer, she's like, all right, I have to go in and I'll be there from like 7 to, 1 or 2 or whatever in the afternoon. So we were on our own. And we would watch soap operas. Soap operas are nothing but storytelling, right? I don't care if you're watching like a nighttime soap opera or you're watching General Hospital. And that's what we watched everything on the ABC lineup in the morning. And I could have told you the plot of anything, of any of those shows, because it was just all storytelling. And like it sucks you in. You watch it and you're suddenly like, well, I got to know what happens. And they cliffhang every episode, like, Donna is the end of that episode. And then you got to wait till the next day to see what happened, of like, oh, her evil twin just locked her in the basement. What's going to happen? And so you tune in the next day. Soap operas are brilliant about that. Like, and every show you watch now, which is like crafted on the same level. So watching those at a really young age, and like being so keenly aware of like how that plot line kind of rose and fell and what that was like when we played, like with our Barbies and stuff. We didn't just be like, here's a mommy and a daddy and a baby. They were like evil twins and people having affairs and like all this. Like my very religious grandmother was just like, she went to my mother and she's like, you would not believe the way these girls, the things that are happening. And because we'd be talking out loud and she could hear us. And my mom's like, oh, well, they've been watching a lot of soaps, but we were having a ball. But what got really interesting about that, so like growing up with that, really understanding story from that, being a big reader, and like the more you read, the more story just makes sense to you. It's just in your bones, the rhythm of it and the rhythm of the way, you set up your character relationships, objective and where, and then things have to change. So then when I started doing improv as an adult, like I, got into improv comedy, it made total sense to me, because what you're basically doing is creating a play without a script. But I knew how story was crafted innately. I know, like, they have this thing in improv they call platform tilt, right? And your platform is your character relationship objective, where like this is who we are to each other, what our I'm Sally and you're Jane, and our relationship is we're sisters. And the objective is you think I'm not being nice enough to mom, and you want to confront me about that. And where are we? We're in mom's basement sorting through old boxes. So that's like how an improv scene might start. And you need all that. But then that platform can only last so long, and then it's got to change. There's got to be what they call an emotional change, where one of us gets really happy in a positive way or something negative happens. Generally, it tends to be negative. Drama is conflict. But I really kind of understood how long a scene could go before something had to change, because that's how soaps are structured. You can't be in love and be happy for a long period of time on a soap, because it's not interesting to people. They need you to almost break up. They need you to, have something bad happen. And you even see what they do to the threads in reality TV. They're taping a bunch of stuff, but they're looking for all the conflict. And that's what crafts story. So certainly then that was just made improv, even though I had no training when I started and I really actually wasn't that good at it, I kind of innately understood how to do an improvised scene, because I innately understood story. And I wrote a lot too. I had majored in English and theater. So that's all about doing other people's writing as an actor and then doing my own writing as an English major, really studying and then continuing to read and study other authors. And you're really looking at how did they do it? How did they tell that story? Why is that compelling? What brings people in? Did I answer the question? I'm just babbling on.
You did a great job. I thought that was absolutely fascinating. I mean,
Oh, you asking how I got into acting?
Oh,
So I was
sister.
saying, so I have
Ooh.
this great sister who then she started when I was in middle school and she was in high school. She started doing theater at the high school, and I think I was doing like photography or something at the middle school. My mom would come pick me up from photography, and then her rehearsals were never done before I was. So my mom and I would go sit in the back of the auditorium and watch the end of rehearsal every day, and I was like kind of train wreck fascinated. Like I didn't necessarily think it was cool. I thought it was weird more than anything. And I was like, oh. And then I went and saw the show when it opened, and I went every night. I just like wanted to see it every night. I just was like, it's not quite exactly the same every night because it's live. It's not like watching, a tape of like, you watch a movie over and over again. It's always the same. Live theater is slightly different when people make mistakes. Like I remember one night my sister had like a wine glass with like colored water in it for her character or something. And she bumped the table and spilled it all over her costume. And she just kept going. She was just like, ah. And in character, like pretended to be annoyed with the spill, but just kept saying her lines. And I was like, that didn't happen the first night. And like, you watch this knowing how, because I've been watching rehearsal. I know it's supposed to happen. I've seen the first show. I know it's supposed to happen. And then suddenly I see her managing that in the moment. And I was just like, so I kind of wanted to be a cheerleader. So I was like going to like cheerleading, tryout practice. And this was right before I was going to be a freshman in high school. And my mom was getting ready to have surgery and she wasn't going to be able to drive for a while because of that. So she said, your sister doesn't have her license yet. Your dad has to work and I won't be able to drive. Will you wait a year to try out for cheerleading? Because we live way out in the country. There were no public buses. It was school buses or you were driving and you couldn't walk, like nothing. It's like Christmas tree farms and horse farms and lots of acreage and, wilderness. So it was like, yeah, it was a beautiful place to grow up. But yeah, we were not near anything. And so I said, okay. So in the year I was waiting, I went and auditioned for a show and got cast. And I just suddenly was like, oh my gosh, this is what I want to do. Like, it was my earliest memory of feeling like I was exactly where I wanted to be. Where I kind of went, this is for me. Because, you try to think, you're like, I think I like that. That was kind of fun. And people are like, would you want to do that? Maybe, I don't know. And this was just like, oh, I don't want to do anything but this. I never skipped school because you couldn't go to rehearsal if you hadn't been in school all day. So I never cut class because I was not going to miss rehearsal.
Nice. That is such an amazing feeling to get to a place in your life where you find something where you go, oh, wow, I love this. I never want to do anything else, whether it's something you do for work or something that you play at or just some kind of hobby that just.
Exactly. And for years, I didn't do this professionally. I did it on the side, when I graduated and my parents would not pay for my education if I majored in theater. They said, we will not pay for you to waste your money on something you will never make money at. That's what they were like. They honestly felt that way. They were like, we're not throwing our money down the drain for you to go be an actor. Because this is in my parents' defense. Whenever I tell people this, my parents were not monsters. Let's be clear. They were paying for my education. Okay. That's a huge gift. Plenty of kids don't get any money towards school, and not because their parents don't want to, they just don't have it. And so my mom went back to work to put money away so my sister and I would go to college because we would be able to afford it. And they actually ran out of money when I was like up to my senior year and I had to get scholarships to like finish out. So, they felt strongly about how their money was being spent and, they made a lot of sacrifices for us. So I completely get it. But what was, like I graduated and I went to work in the corporate world, and I like just did theater at night and I kept kind of denying it for a long time because I was scared because I didn't think it was possible. And my parents had no blueprint. They did not know one professional actor at all. They didn't know they didn't know a working actor. They were like, you're Julia Roberts or you're not. Like you are either famous and walking red carpets and winning Oscars, but they never interestingly looked at their television and went, well, who do you think all these other like smaller actors are who you've never heard of who are in a scene with Julia Roberts? Like if you're watching the movie Pretty Woman and there's the woman who's mean to her in the dress store, that woman's an actress. She's not famous, but she's a working actor. She got paid to do that movie, so they didn't think about it that way. But it's also, it's very hard to, when you don't know anyone who's doing that job, it can be really hard to know how to talk to someone else about whether or not it's possible. It probably sounded impossible to them. And they liked living where they were living. And I couldn't wait to leave. Like, I was like, it was a nice place to go to, like this kind of country life. And it was sweet. It was peaceful, but I always craved more excitement. I always wanted to live in a city. So. So anyway, yeah, that was then me going into my real life, like my adult life was working the corporate world from 8 to 5 and doing theater at night and getting home at like 11 and eating dinner. And I did that for years. And my bills were paid by my corporate job, and I bought a house by myself, at one point because I had money, but I was really unhappy. I was also like shopping too much, going out too much, because I was kind of numbing my unhappiness, being, well, I've got money to spend, so I'm just going to go buy shoes, or I'm going to go, out for dinner every night with friends or something. And instead of being smart about it and like saying, okay, I'm working this job, I'm making a lot of money, let me save that money, build up a nest egg of 2 years of living expenses of like rent and food and utilities, and then I can quit. And then I can like pursue what I really want to pursue. And it wasn't until I was married and I met my husband, and then suddenly we had 2 incomes, and I felt like, okay, if things aren't working out for me, but it was also him being very encouraging about that and being like, listen, because I was like, we could lose the house. And he was like, and then we're free. Because you don't have a mortgage anymore. And I was like, that's true. Because what really made me feel trapped was having a job I hated, and then buying a house was not the brightest thing I could have done, because I thought the house would make me feel better. And what it made me feel was even more trapped, because suddenly I had to stay at a job I didn't like to pay my mortgage. Mm-hmm. And that's something to consider, like, especially when you're young, like go ahead and pursue your dreams when you don't own property or have children or things that you will feel very responsible towards. Like a great time to do that is when you're young, is because the failure doesn't feel as scary. It might feel like a bummer, but you won't be like panicking about, well, how am I going to eat? Or, like if you're living a simpler life and you can easily kind of move around, and it's suddenly when you own a lot of stuff, when homes are expensive and, your plumbing gives out, you have to fix that. You don't call your super and say, the plumbing's out, and they fix it and they pay for it. You fix it and you pay for it and you figure out what to do. And there's a whole new level of stress. So I think sometimes when people take on all these expected things that we in society have said success, well, if you're successful, you got a person that you're in love with and you live in a certain house, and like success looks this certain way, and kind of when success is happy. And if happy for you is living in a studio apartment with, just the bare bones of furniture, and you're pursuing your dream and you are wildly happy every day, and you're safe and you're taking care of yourself, that's not a bad way to live. Like that can actually be joyous. And I think sometimes people look back nostalgically at those times once they've taken on stuff that they're not as happy with. I think they can get really nostalgic about it.
I love the direction you took that in, because, as an autistic adult myself, I've noticed that a lot of times we get this idea that life has to look a particular way. This is what being successful looks like, or these are the things you're supposed to enjoy, or these are the things you're supposed to do. That's not always what makes you happy.
No. And you don't know until you try it. So there's no fault in trying it. But if you get into it and you're like, I don't like this, change, do something else. Like we really are privileged to live in a country where it's not like that job was picked for you and you're going to do that till you die.
Yeah.
And there are places you can live where like you don't have a choice. We do. So whenever people complain, like bitterly complain about their job endlessly, I'm like, you might not find one that is quote unquote wildly better or pays you a bunch more, but you can probably find one you hate less. Like you staying in like a relationship or a job you don't like is ultimately a choice. Mm-hmm. So take that into consideration. Like, when you're looking at the state of your life and you're feeling unhappy and you want to blame it on a bunch of other things, really remember you chose these things.
Yeah.
Like you can be like, no, someone chose that for me. I'm like, that kind of ends at a certain point. Like, yes, when you're young, you have to go to school, like legally, your parents can't not educate you, which thank God, because I would really feel sorry.
You definitely need education. That's important.
Well, here's the thing. You're very easy to control when you aren't educated. People who don't know, who are literally, if all the information you got, you had to get from someone else and you had to believe it because you had no capability of researching and processing information on your own, which is so much of what education is teaching you. Yeah. It's teaching you to take in a bunch of stuff, process it and form a worldview about it or an opinion and being like, this is what I think. And it took me a long time to get there. I was a pleaser when I was in school. I was very much like straight A's and gold stars and teacher's pet. And, you know, like I knew how to play that game. And my sister, my creative, interesting sister, got me into acting. She could not have been more different. Now, of the two of us, who's probably smart? We're both pretty smart, but who's smarter? She's a little smarter. And she's also wildly curious about anything and everything. Everything's interesting to her. There's very few things she will not just watch out of curiosity. The classes she took, everything from studying whales to working on cadavers to English. I mean, she just did everything because she was interested and curious. And again, like if you just looked at our living room table and the books she would bring home from the library, ran the gamut of weird stuff where you were like, you would think it was 6 different people's books and not one. She could have cared less about grades, and she was in trouble all the time. She had bad grades. I had excellent grades. She had terrible grades because she would do the assignment and she wouldn't turn it in. And my mom would be like, you did that assignment. I watched you do that assignment. You sat at the table and you did that assignment. You didn't turn in. She goes, I knew I did it. Why do I need that person to approve? You know, like she was that kind of a thinker. She could have cared less. And it was very interesting to grow up with, because I would be like, God, Lisa, your life would be so much easier if you just play the game a little bit. Like you'd get all the rewards that I'm getting. Like, look, because I was getting like all these rewards and stuff. And like, you're in trouble all the time. And I'm getting ice cream parties, you know? And she would just was like, care. Like she didn't care.
All right, that's kind of what I want to be when I grow up, I think.
I know. And she's still kind of that way. And it does cost her sometimes socially.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like if you react in social situations sometimes, you know, ways that other people don't think are appropriate or normal. And I cannot tell you the amount of people who would come up to me and be like, your sister's weird. She's really weird. What's wrong with your sister? She's weird. And I would feel so protective of her. And then just like bummed that because she was so, well, sometimes she is still so brilliant and such an interesting person. But she is someone who has a lot of like social anxiety. And I guess the people who get to know her well are the lucky ones. Is just how I thought about it. Like they're the lucky ones because. What'd you say?
She's found the people who are her or she is their cup of tea. The people who come to her are the ones who are like, you are my cup of tea.
Yeah. Like, yeah. And I think some people who get put off, like, you know, we're talking about like what's perceived as normal can get put off and miss out. Maybe growing up with someone like that has left me more open to someone being different and being like, well, there may be something there, you know, like worth getting to know, you know, as long as it's mean or something, but it's like, just because they express a little differently or they're a little more free spirited in some way, or they're not, you know, they're the Phoebe of Friends as opposed to the Rachel, you know, like you ever see that episode where they went running in the park and Rachel's like, shoo, 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 and Phoebe was like, and like running and stuff. And they couldn't have been, and she was like, Rachel's like, you're so embarrassing. And she was like, yeah, but you're not having any fun. And I think, you know, I think that there's room for all of it. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. And there is something to be said for having fun. And sometimes some of us need to be reminded that it's okay to have fun and to love what you love. And I think
despite anyone thinking you should, or you're good at it, but if it's bringing you a lot of happiness, and again, you can love something and not do it for a living. Like I was doing community theater and I was doing, you know, what would be called non-union theater, which means I wasn't getting paid every time I rehearsed. I would get paid at the end of the show. So it wasn't enough to pay my bills, but I did so much of that. You know, it's all fine. It's all just experiences I had. And you meet so many people when you, like, the more you say, but there's a great quote. It's an improv quote by Keith Johnstone. It's my favorite quote. And it says, there are those that choose to say yes and those that choose to say no. Those that say yes are rewarded by the adventures they attain. And those that say no are rewarded by the safety they attain. There are far more no-sayers than yes-sayers. And saying yes is what opens you up to adventure. Now, should you say no sometimes? I see there's applause from Joshua. But, you know, should you say yes to everything? No. Like run out in the middle of the street in wild traffic? No, say no to that. Attain some safety. But, you know, maybe go hang out with some people that you're feeling a little anxious about that, because those could end up being some of your closest friends. Say yes to that.
So true. So true. And I think that it's also particularly important for parents to hear this because, you know, not all of us grew up with somebody who maybe is like your sister, you know, who kind of, or at least who your sister was for you, who expanded kind of your ideas of, well, you know, what can things look like? How can things be different? And so I think that for parents, that's particularly important, especially if they have one of those kids who is more different in the way that they do things, or is interested in theater and they know no paid actors, or, you know, whatever it is, because it expands their ideas of, oh, this is a possibility. Oh, this is potentially who they are.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And you know what's really interesting now too is like you start looking at casting. Like, you know, it used to be that if you were going to like maybe play someone with autism, that they were going to, you know, hire me to like do that, and I would study that and do that. Now they're like making a real effort to hire an actually autistic actor to do that. That's a big shift. There's a movie I just watched. It's out on Apple TV called Cha Cha Real Smooth. Have you seen that or heard about that?
But I think I've heard about it.
It's Dakota Johnson is in it, and her daughter is autistic, and I have a feeling that actress really is who plays the daughter, or she is absolutely brilliant at portraying it, because I was like, that's a really convincing performance. But I kind of think that they might have actually found an autistic actress to portray the daughter. You're seeing, like, you know, if you look at a movie like Coda, you know, where they didn't have hearing actors playing those roles, they had deaf actors playing those roles.
Right.
So, you know, I was like, that's great that's happening.
And there also, I think I read about that one, and that was the one where they had everybody learn some sign language on set, which I thought was fantastic.
When I see calls all the time for auditions where, you know, it'll be like, we are looking for an actor with a disability, like, you know, and they'll kind of list out specifically what it is. Like, they don't want someone to come in and pretend. And it's like, no, we're not going to use CGI. Like, we actually want you to not have your arms, like, if that's what this is about, or you need to be an actual wheelchair user. You're not someone who's just like going to get in and pretend. Like that. There's been a big shift in that, you know, where they're trying to be more inclusive with casting. And so that's when I'm like, well, these dreams aren't out of reach, where it might have felt that way 20 years ago, you know.
Well, and
there really are only, you know, people getting lauded, like actors getting Oscars and stuff, because they portrayed someone who was differently abled or whatever was going on. And now, more often than not, they're like actually making an effort to find, you know, people who actually are living that.
And it provides opportunities that didn't used to be there, which
is
so amazing to be able to have so many more opportunities than what we had before.
Are you homeschooling a student, or want to be homeschooling a student who learns a little different from the average student? I'd highly recommend checking out a Charlotte Mason Plenary. A Charlotte Mason Plenary is a homeschool company focused on the philosophy of Charlotte Mason. Charlotte Mason was an educational philosopher in the late 1800s, early 1900s, who recognized the importance of not just educating a child body and mind, but also educating them as a whole person with a diet rich in the humanities, the studies of what makes us better human beings. It is not enough to know everything. You also have to know how to use that knowledge in a way that contributes positively to the world. A Charlotte Mason Plenary has all sorts of resources for helping you do Charlotte Mason your way. We also have form guides over there that allow you to plan a customized curriculum in 3 easy steps. And I even partnered with the Charlotte Mason Plenary to create a developmental form guide that goes with these guides, that explains to you where to place your child and how to make all sorts of adaptations for different types of learners. Go check it out at cmplenary.com.
I'm going to go ahead and open it up and let each of the students that joined us today have an opportunity to add any comments that they want to add, or questions or whatever, to the discussion. Joshua, let's start with you. And I'm going to unpin us so that we can be in a more discussion-friendly format. Okay, go Joshua.
As Miss Amy just said, I'm Joshua.
Hi, Joshua.
I have been a reader since a very young age. I've always loved reading stories of various kinds. And as I've gotten older, I've gained a bit of an interest in collaborative storytelling in forms like tabletop role-playing games like Dungeons and
Mhm.
Dragons and the Pokemon tabletop RPG, and also in collaborative forms like online roleplay.
Uh-huh.
So, each person writes a couple paragraphs and responds to the next person, responds to the next person. And that's been a big part of my life for the last probably half a decade even, is just these forms of telling stories with other people. So to me, storytelling does mean a lot in that way because it's been how I make friends, how I interact with people, is working with them to tell a fun story. And whether that's, through the characters that I make or through, designing the story myself and, guiding other people through this adventure, it's just such a great experience.
You know what you would probably really thrive in is improv. Because talk about telling a story with other people. Like you literally are starting out and you're like, we have no script. We have no way to know where this is going. It's like I make an offer, you say yes, and you add information to that. And then suddenly we build a scene together. And I mean, there are people like, you can go see like like in San Francisco, there's a group called BATS, Bay Area Theater Sports, and they do like improvised musicals, like literally whole, like where you don't know the song you're about to sing. I went and took their workshop and it is exhilarating and terrifying. Someone just starts playing a melody and you start singing and you're making up lyrics and then people are joining in for I mean, it's crazy. And they train you how to do it, but it's like you would probably really thrive on that because it's not all on you to like know where it's going. You just have to be extremely present and in the moment, kind of saying yes to whatever is coming up and being willing to add information. And one of the things I think is so rewarding when you're doing improv well, because let's say there's plenty of terrible, unsatisfying improv out there when people are being really selfish or it's, it's like all about them and they're not willing to give but if we're in an improv group together, I'm like, oh, Josh is like got his big Dungeons and Dragons background and he actually loves playing, like a, this particular type of character. So I might start a scene with you where I'd be like, my liege, I've returned from the, and I'll like bring you something. And then you immediately like, it's like, oh, my friend is here to play. Like
most wonderful.
Yeah. And then we launch
the item I requested.
because like the world. And so if I know what you like, if we're working in a group together, like when I'm starting scenes with you, my job is to try to delight you and make you want to play. In the best improv groups, like when you're working with people in the situation, oh my gosh, every night it's so fun. And the best thing about storytelling, like when people tend to really love storytelling, is watching people have a great time on stage together. The joyousness of that brings so much to the audience when we look like we're having fun, as opposed to when I'm like, I want to do this right, and you said something and you screwed up, and no, and I can't control it, and I'm uncomfortable, and like that ruins it. That just is a joy kill. But if you're there with a group of people, so you may want to look into improv classes and training in your area, and like if there isn't a group, start one. That's how every improv group I've ever been in happened. Somebody said, I don't want to just do this in a class. I want to do this with a group of people I like on a regular basis and charge money and make money to like do this in front of people. And I mean, there's no limit to what you can do with that. Or, if you go take really great training, and it's a process, like it took me a long time. But again, if you have something like these games that you've been playing, it will feel innate. And then once you, and then they teach, what's great about classes is it gives you technique. And then once you have technique, what you can do is when things go awry, you can fall back on your technique. So you can break all sorts of rules when things are working. And then when you're suddenly like, okay, something's wrong, we don't know how to fix it, let me go back to the technique. What's wrong? We need a new offer. We need a new tilt. Like we've been in this platform too long. It needs to change, positive or negative. Something has to change. And you start understanding story structure. And again, the more you read, the more you're just training your brain to understand it in such like, have you ever heard about
it's so satisfying when you can just like tell where a story is about to go because you've read so many things.
Yes.
And you can just see it coming, and it can be so rewarding when it does happen the way you think it will. But sometimes it just also is, oh well, they're doing this trope again.
Yes, I was about to say, like it's both, right? Because I used to work on this thing called the Jaw Theater Festival at Portland Center Stage, and it was new work. So people would submit new plays and we would then workshop them. And I was on the reading committee for it. So I read hundreds of plays, new plays that, you'd never read before. Someone had just written it and they were looking to workshop it. And I cannot tell you like how many times you're like, I know exactly where this is going. Yep, that's where it went. And the stuff I was most excited about was the stuff that surprised me. So the more you read, the more you're going to be charmed and delighted by something that catches you off guard. And I feel that way now when I watch television. Like if I'm watching a show and I'm like, I don't know where this is going, I'm a little more like, okay, they did a good job, but that was super predictable. Like I'm snobbier about it now, as opposed to when I'm like, I watched Breaking Bad and I remember my jaw dropping like 100 times, like watching that show, because it would be like, what did they just do? Like they would do something that's so like I didn't see it coming. And that's one of the reasons I just thought that show had such great writing and story.
And one of the differences, I think, is when you can see it coming from a long time away, or it just seems kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
It can be less satisfying. But when you're in the moment and it's that scene and you see this little detail that tips you off that something might be about to happen, and you're like, are they going to? Oh my gosh, I hope they do. Oh, they just did. Oh my gosh, they did it. That's the moment.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
When
and you're so engaged, and they've hooked you and you care. Like that's to me like really a hallmark of good stories. How much do you care what happens to people? Are you like on your phone? Oh yeah, he's dead. All right, I thought that was what was gonna. Or are you just like no, not so and so?
And that kind of leads into what I had to say about Genshin Impact.
Oh, you play Genshin?
Yes, I've been playing almost since launch. Love the game. Music is
beautiful. Yeah.
But first of all, I am a Noelle main.
Are you?
Yes,
have you built her out? Have you built her out to like a what do you call it?
Yep, got her triple crown, C6, all the good stuff.
Well done.
Probably need to farm artifacts a bit more, but so for Genshin, it is one of the few stories that can routinely make me cry with happiness. There's so much detail and so much attachment to the characters that they build throughout the stories. Each interaction just lets you know more about them as a person, how they behave, how they act. And it's the characters that really make a lot of scenes come to life. For example, right now, there's an event going on in the Golden Apple Archipelago, and the characters you're traveling there with get to kind of live out their deepest desires and dreams through some magic that's going on that we still haven't figured out quite what's going on.
Yeah.
But the third part of that quest is with a character named Fischl. And throughout this story, she's shown to be so hesitant to enter her dream because she knows there's stuff there that she doesn't want to confront. There are parts of her life that she doesn't like and that she just can't really bring herself to face at that time. But when you guys, like the rest of the party, are there and you're having trouble and she's needed the most, she steps in and helps.
Yeah.
And that's when she shows up after being missing for part of the story. And then you go through the last part of this huge castle area, and you finally put together the castle that was built by her imagination. And without spoiling the story too much, she's forced to confront a darker part of herself in that story and overcome that. Her closest friend seems to have betrayed her, but she manages to keep who she is, both the good and the bad. And then it goes into the end cutscene, and the music and the imagery and the words, all of it come together into this beautiful moment. And I love it when Genshin does this, because
that's so great. And it's
between the writing and the animation and Yu Peng Chen's beautiful compositions, it creates such a beautiful moment full of emotion when this character that you've watched grow just blossoms.
Yeah, and it's so rewarding to be a part of something like that, that's having that impact like that. I think, Amy, when we were first, like, kind of what connected us was something I had said in another interview about people saying, oh, so you're just an actor, you don't like save lives or anything. It's like, no, not in a typical way. I honestly don't. But I don't think theater and writing and, movies and TV and video games and all these things, we crave story. We crave it nonstop. It's just something that as human beings we want. And it started like with cavemen around a campfire and oral tradition and things being passed down and writing. And I remember one time someone for a class, like a college class, had like through a friend of a friend had been like, oh, you know, someone who's like an actor, you know. And so she wanted to interview me because she was like in high school, and she said, you know, well, when people kind of talk to you about whether it's important or not to be an actor, like, what do you say? And I'm like, we're the storytellers of our generation. Like, if you, like right now, I like had you see all these things coming through about like movies about COVID, you know, like we're like that they're addressing this thing that happened, and it creates permanent records. And like, if you wanted to know what time was like in Shakespeare's time, you know, you can go and you can read some of the things that were written then, and you can get context clues about what was going on. Or a movie that was made in like a non-documentary that was made in the 60s really reflect things like the Vietnam War and like just different things that were happening. Like it's a fictional story, but it's set in a time that's capturing our history and telling this story of who we are and where we've been and where we're going.
And it can be such an engaging way to learn.
Yeah. Like, well, you know what they call it is like edutainment, right? Like anything that is, instead of education or entertainment, it's edutainment. So it's putting those two together. It's like finding a way to do storytelling that will engage people. But then there are like, what do you think Aesop's fables or even Bible stories are about, right? There's a moral. They're trying to teach you something, but they're telling you this little story and then kind of extracting from that. Like, what do you think that's about? Why do you think it's mean? Why do you think this, and this is why? And it was ways people were sometimes trying to explain the way the world was, or trying to explain how you should be if you were to be a good person. Like if you think about like, you know, biblical stories, you know, they were like, be this type of a person. This is like what we're trying to teach you. But they did it through storytelling.
Well, and it's a participatory thing, which is interesting. And I especially see this a lot of times when we're talking about mythology too, because it's an oral tradition. It gets retold with each generation, whether that's through Thor, the movies, or Rick Riordan, Percy Jackson.
Yeah. No, for sure. Like that was the Greeks just trying to explain like why we had different seasons. You know, like why the winter, and like why was like, you know, the nothing grew during that period of time and stuff. And it was all the whole Persephone and Hades and the underworld and Hester and like that whole myth.
I remember that way better.
What'd you say?
I remember that way better than the scientific explanation.
Yeah, for sure.
That's very fair. Yeah.
Because it was engaging. Like you do remember what's entertaining and engaging. And so it is very smart. Like have you ever had like a class where you did like role play type stuff? Like I remember doing these trading games in like 4th grade where they did a caste system. They wanted to teach us about caste systems, like in Africa, like where you've got the like priests were the highest, and then you had like people with these certain jobs were kind of like middle class, and then you had like the really low level people. And I remember they passed out the cards and we all got our card. And so they were like, who got a card they think is great? And there were some people who had gotten like the really low caste and like, I think it's great because I'm a leather worker and I think it would be really fun to like work with leather, blah, 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 blah. And then someone was like, and who got a job they didn't like? So it's like a priest because boring, because church is boring. Like, you know, they said something like that. And then when we started playing the game, and what they did is in the room, they like made us, when we went to lunch, we all had to sit with people in our caste. And there were only a couple priests, right? Because stuff at the top tends to be the 1%. So they had a table, but then there was like, you know, a bigger group of people in the middle who were more middle class, and then the kind of like reject ones. And I remember my best friend was in like the lower one, and she was like really mad and upset about that. And then we couldn't sit together. And it was like, you know, there's so many different, there's auditory learning, there's visual learning, and there's kinetic learning, right? So auditory is like the traditional school system. You sit and you listen and someone talks at you. That is not most people's learning style. And then you have visual learning where you're looking at something, and most people connect better with that. And then there's kinetic experiential learning, which is what, especially artistic people, where you're doing and it's in your body and you're figuring it out by doing it and having that experience, and you're moving around. So whenever I've taught anything, I've always just pushed everything to the sides of the room and used the center of the room, and it's physical and it's active, because I think when it lives in your body, most people remember it better, right? They say if you take notes on a computer, you remember less than if you write it out longhand, because there is something that happens in the brain hand connection of actually taking written notes that will make you remember and retain information more than what you type. It's you know, you can't really.
And I think a lot of it is this relationship that we form, and a lot of times when we're listening, we're not actively forming a relationship. That's why, if you're going to be listening to something, you add in some discussion or you do participatory storytelling like Joshua was talking about, because it's all about making those connections and that relationship, however you're going to do it. But it comes back to forming a relationship, and different people form relationships with different things. Well, different things light them up. So, if you're trying to teach Greek mythology and Rick Riordan is what lights up a kid, that's a great end road. Let's start there. Okay, we watched the movie. Let's read the book. Or,
I had a computer teacher, because I was like, and I was really like, I had to take computer programming, I think, when I was in high school. And the guy was the nicest guy. He was really funny. And I would be like, I just don't like math and computers. And as soon as I never have to take another class like this again, I won't. And he was so sweet and dear, because I know he was like, he respected my opinion, but he really wanted to show me that it had value to me. So he loved to try and take computer terminology he was trying to teach me and relate it to theater, because he knew I was doing theater. He'd be like, Laura, it's kind of like theater, like in the theater. And he would like draw some relation to try and help my brain understand it. It was he was such a good teacher when I look back on it, because he was like just going, what does she like, and how can I reach her? I don't want her to leave this class and not understand. And he really worked hard on that.
All right, I'm going to respect your time and go ahead and open the floor up, because we've got Jessica and Austin left. So guys, I'm going to let y'all unmute yourselves now, and y'all can both share, like not at the same time, but together.
Okay.
What are some of your thoughts?
So I really like stories, like in storytelling myself, like whether it's reading or actually writing stories myself, which I've gotten into lately, which is kind of surprising because I was very delayed with reading. I'm pretty sure like I started reading at age 10 and I'm 14 now, so I'm very new to reading. I mean,
but passionate about it.
Yes, audiobooks helped a lot of that, but through that I was able to like make characters though, because art is something, and games and books and like shows, books will sometimes have art and stuff in them. I was actually drawing when I was I was listening to you guys talk. I drew Noel. There you go.
Oh, that's great. Oh, that's so
Thank you.
good.
Well, and that's a very good point you brought up, that storytelling is bigger than the format. It's not a skill, it's a relationship.
Yeah.
Skills just can get in the way if we've got a block. And there's different ways that we can access those stories, especially now with all the advances in technology too. But that's amazing. And you don't have to be a good writer to be a good storyteller. You can
do
that.
God, graphic novels, right? Yeah. Like where, like half the cells are action scenes, or, people giving a look, and it's like, you didn't have to write. Jenny looked at Tom and she wondered what he, but you just have the character go, this is a podcast, like I just turned my head to the side and like looked like I was trying, like I was doing the, physical expression that, but artistically for sure, like there's so much where you can like just have drawings with no writing, and we can still follow along and understand it emotionally, because it really always is an emotional journey, that a character is taking, whatever they're on. Like Josh was talking about with Fischl and Genshin, right? Where you're watching this character blossom and change, and like we are innately curious and interested in watching other people go through journeys, any kind of hero's journey, whether it's Star Wars or Catcher in the Rye, or like classic novels, or even something more new. Anything of people being on a quest, we tend to get really invested in. So
yes,
I didn't mean to interrupt you. So did you have more to say?
But it can also be just like seeing how characters interact, the relationship they have throughout the story. I like those stories a lot. Yes, action is also good in like the story. My favorite series is one of my favorite book series is based around like characters going off to go do something, and then eventually like ending up figuring out how to fix it or whatever, and then come back. But they usually will make friends along the way, or another book series they it's focused on the characters' relationships they make, and that's what makes it at the end of the story makes me upset, because a character goes, the book's like, you like this character a lot, don't you? Guess what? They're gonna die. I'm like, no.
Right.
Emotional connection and investment. And really, honestly, I think that's really an important point, because I know a lot of times autistic kids, I can say that because I'm autistic myself, but also other kids too. Sometimes we have trouble connecting with certain emotions, and to be able to experience that in a story format where we can experience more than just our own experiences, or experience someone else's feelings and then be like, whoa, I'm experiencing something new myself, and now I can notice it better.
Also, growing a connection with the characters, just it can make a lot of emotions for when something bad or something good happens. When a character has something bad happen to them, you're going to feel the emotions they're feeling, like, oh my, that should not have happened to this character. You do not deserve any of that. You deserve everything good in the world.
But whatever.
But then think about, like, if you were just watching, like why it's even compelling in the first place is the conflict, right? Like, drama is conflict. So you have to have, that's the tilt. When we talked about platform tilt, that's the tilt. Like, positive tilt, you win the lottery. Negative tilt, your mother dies and you go off on your own on this, like, right? Like every Disney thing, right? The young heroine is, something horrible happens to her parents and she's kind of on her own. Like, if you look at all these stories that she's suddenly in the woods with a bunch of dwarves because her evil stepmother, this and that.
There's definitely the need for, like, the negative stuff, but the connection makes you realize how much of an impact, like, minor things can be to this character's, like, how they're feeling, and then major things, you'll be able to connect with them a lot more. Again, with how in one book I was reading, a character died. Wow, I'm talking a lot about that.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, the thing is, that's the thing I've heard the most about from that book, is it made such an impact on you that the character you cared about so much was the one to die.
Yes, I'm like,
that made an impact on you, and that's what I've heard most from you about the entire series.
I do not tear up or cry usually because of fiction, but the only two things that have been able to do that is I saw one clip from a movie, and then I cried while watching it, and then one was that book, and I teared up because I knew this character did not deserve any of this. He was trying to just do his best in the world and whatever, or just like trying to do his best, but it ended up being that happened, so it made me tear up because I'd grown such a bond, especially when it's in the first person, because you get to see how the character's thoughts affect things and how they're thinking, and every point of view, first person writing, it tends to have something different for it, whether it's more of a character has a particular emotion that tends to go along with how their writing is, or maybe the character has a different kind of writing style compared to other characters, such as maybe one character is a lot more into describing the scene while another character is more focused on their thoughts and their character and how they're talking with other characters and stuff. You get to see how other people think in those stories, and it makes you bond with the characters much easier compared to when it's a third person kind of story or something.
Like,
well, and how wonderful to have had something that moved you that much, right?
Yes,
something
definitely.
that exists is such a great thing in this world to experience. It's like eating really great food and reading great books or watching really wonderful movies that you think of for days afterwards. Like, you just keep thinking about it and thinking about it. And I always just think, God, isn't it great that exists? Like, what if everything was stuff that tasted like, a plain piece of bread, or something, just if life were flavorless, even if it's upsetting, like the highs and the lows, like all of that, like that is where all the juice is.
Yes. If the book was just happy stuff, then it probably wouldn't have impacted me that much. I'm just like, oh yay, happy things. But if that didn't happen, it definitely would not have left such a mark.
And because you don't change and grow without like that, those kinds of and it's something to think about when I've had actors, like I've taught acting classes to people and young people like in high school, and sometimes they'll be like, because gosh, being young is hard sometimes, and I really think one of the hardest things is everything is more surprising when you're young. Like how mean people can be sometimes is very surprising. And then you get to be my age and you're like, not so surprising, because I've just lived long enough to see people be that way enough where you're like, yeah, it's what someone's capable of. But I know the first time someone wasn't nice to me, it was devastating, because I was like, I just am here to be loved and to love back. And oh, not everyone's on that agenda. What? And it's so upsetting. But to think about like what you just said in regards to that book is, you know, we are a product of all the experiences we have, the good and the bad. And so that when you come up against a difficult thing in your life, like to always remember, this is all adding to the person I'm becoming. And not the least of which of things you can get from bad experience is humility and compassion, right? So I was bullied by someone, a girl in our neighborhood when I was young. And prior to her doing that, I could be catty. You know what I mean? Like I could be kind of, you know, like I was not above getting on the band. Like I wasn't a bully myself, but I wasn't above people were gossiping about someone and I would join in on that. But after this girl like went after me, it changed me, because I suddenly knew what that felt like. And I could never see it the same way again, because I knew the agony of that, like that was so painful and hurtful, and how alone I felt when it was going on, and helpless, you know. And then when you see someone, it just really was a great reminder when I was suddenly in situations where it was my choice to join with the rest of the group and gossip or gang up on someone, or be kind, or just abstain if that was like, if I felt like, oh gosh, I'm not brave enough to like get up and fight a battle, but at least I won't participate in this in some way. Like it created a shift in me as a person. But I had to go through that experience, because I think if I had always been the top dog, popular one that everyone liked, like I could have grown up to be more of a mean girl then, but it happened when I was like 8, you know, so.
And if you read a book or saw a movie or, you know, had a character that you were attached to and that happened to them, then in a way you get to have that experience without having to have someone go out and say, hey, she needs to be taken down a notch. Can you go over and bully her?
Yeah.
Not how we learn effectively.
It's a safer way to go and experience these kinds of emotions, because there are things in that book I do not want happening to real people, and that is a much safer way to go and experience those emotions.
For sure.
It is.
And we haven't, I guess we should like let Austin talk probably, right?
Yeah,
Austin, would you like to say something? Because everyone else
You've been patiently waiting.
Well, there's a lot of different ways to tell stories. You can tell them through music. You can tell them through, without even saying any words. You can say it all through like background and characters. You don't even need words. Like I play a lot of video games, but I really enjoy playing a lot of retro games from like the 90s or the 80s. One of those is Super Metroid, which the game only has like a few sentences, like at least like 10. And after like that last, little starting thing that tells you about what happened before, then there's just no text, and you get to learn about all the environment and how this came to be, all by just only the background and stuff.
Yeah.
Like
I used to take piano lessons, and my mom had a framed picture over the piano, and it said, after silence, that's which comes closest to expressing the inexpressible is music.
Yeah.
And I always love that, because I don't know about you, but when I've heard like a really beautiful piece of music, I can be moved to tears by it. Like if you've ever heard, just beautiful, even instrumental music, or like the mood it will put you in. Like I change my mood a lot with music. Like if you want to be jazzed up because you're going to go work out, I'm going to put on something with a really good beat and, like makes you feel like kind of, or like you're getting ready to go out at night and you put on Beyonce because you want to be in a party mood. But if you want to go to sleep, you might put on like lo-fi, Japanese hip hop or something where it's just like super mellow and chill, and classical music, and then how soothing those things are. So yes, I think you're absolutely right that you don't need words at all to storytell. Sometimes there's actually an improv form we used to do called silent scene, where you did not talk. You did a whole scene, and it was just no words, and it was just two characters interacting. Like I might pretend to hand you a letter and you read it and you have an emotional reaction, and it was either like this reaction or it was like, and then we just knew where the story was going from there. Fascinating to do because you can't talk, but you still had to tell a whole story.
Oh, that is fascinating, and kind of like taking it back to the early days of movies and television with the silent film.
Silent movies, you know.
Although sometimes they'd put dialogue at the bottom.
Yeah, they'd have those placards, the dialogue placards.
Well, Laura, it has been so wonderful to get to have you on the podcast today and be able to visit with us. I definitely appreciate it, and I know that all of the students that joined us today did too. So thank you for joining us, and I will see you guys next time. Thanks for joining us.
We hope you had fun listening to today's episode and gained some new insights into the wonderful variety of people in our world. You can find out more about Amy's advocacy work at amybodkin.com. And remember, special needs kids are people too.